Good morning and welcome, both to those here in person at the IMF headquarters in Washington, D.C., and to those joining us online for the formal launch of the PortWatch platform. I'm Alistair Thompson. I'm Head of Innovation and Change in the Office of Transformation Management. Back in 2021, the IMF launched a Climate Innovation Challenge, asking the question, how might we integrate climate change into economic analysis to promote green policies? We received 45 submissions, from which 5 winning proposals were selected, including PortWatch, which we'll hear about more shortly. The Swiss State Secretariat for Economic Affairs sponsored the challenge, covering both administrative costs and startup costs for the 5 winning projects, and we're very grateful to SECO for their support. With that, I'd like to introduce Ceyla Pazarbazioglu, our Head of Strategy, Policy and Review, and Bert Kroscher, our Chief Statistician and Director of Statistics.
Thank you, Alistair, and good morning, colleagues, friends. It's a great pleasure to be here. This is a very exciting project and a great form of collaboration. We are in a very shock-prone world, as our managing director keeps saying, and climate change, of course, adds to the intensity of the shocks and the implications of these shocks due to frequent extreme weather events and other developments. So we have learned during the last few years that we should be ready to expect the unexpected and use whatever tools we have to be able to understand implications, spillovers, and how we can support member countries as the fund. So this is a really important tool for the institution, and basically timely information on the economic impact of shocks as they occur. So this is, as I said, this is very exciting. It's a new product that will make important contribution towards these goals. An online platform, PortWatch, to monitor and simulate trade disruptions. So why is it called PortWatch? Ports are critical nodes in the global economy. I was struck at a meeting yesterday that some of the specific areas and straits are very concentrated. They are like, 1/3, 1/5 of the global trade goes through these specific straits. So, and they are vulnerable to disruptions. Ports are vulnerable to disruptions due to climate events, due to earthquakes, floods, cyclones, and also more recently more sensitive to geopolitical developments. So hopefully we don't see much of this, but this is really important to understand. If port activity gets disrupted, what are the implications for the countries that are connected to the trade network integrated with that particular port or the port system? So it is very much critical part of the fund's mandate in terms of interconnectedness, understanding trade. Trade, as you know, is Article 1 for the IMF. It's really important work for us. We have taken to the executive board in March 2023 our trade strategy in the context of bilateral and multilateral surveillance. And this tool will be very important in terms of advancing our agenda to monitor trade and addressing supply chain resilience, trade diversification, and cross-border spillovers through trade. So it is really exciting. You will hear from colleagues shortly. It also offers a really great model of collaboration across different partners, across IMF departments, and also across partner organizations. There are experts from academia, you will hear from some of them, international organizations, and the private sector. So it's really innovative and excellent. In the fund, the project has been led by colleagues from Strategy Policy Review Department and Statistics Department. So it is really a great collaboration with our Statistics Department, and I will now pass the floor to my colleague, Bert Kroscher. Bert has been really leading very important initiatives since he took over the director of the statistics department and our chief statistician. It's really a great pleasure to work with you, Bert, and privilege for me to open this, the launching of the PortWatch. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Ayla. Thanks, Alistair. Good morning. It's an honor to join you all here today. These days are really the best days in my work at the fund to launch important initiatives like this. It's great. Confronting climate change will require unprecedented innovation and collaboration. And that's why in 2021, the Managing Director of the IMF and our partners launched the Climate Innovation Challenge. And I'm very proud to announce that today we'll launch a new product developed from that challenge, PortWatch, a platform to monitor trade disruptions from space. As Jaila mentioned, PortWatch is a collaboration between the Strategy Policy Review Department at the IMF, our Statistics Department, Oxford University, ESRI. And after expensive development and close collaboration across the IMF and other institutions, it's now ready to be used by IMF staff and other stakeholders. The platform offers cutting-edge analytical tools to help users assess the regional and global impact of actual and potential future disasters on trade. It uses satellite-based vessel data and big data analytics to produce actionable insights for policymakers, international organizations, and also the public. It offers scenario analysis, facilitating stress testing of the maritime trade network. And PortWatch is a great example of how the IMF is using big data analytics for economic surveillance and other fund operations. It shows how big data can help the fund identify vulnerabilities more rapidly, conduct more granularly, more detailed analysis, and strengthen advice with new advice and possibilities that cannot be gotten from other more traditional sources. I'd like to mention a few other examples of big data use that we have enhanced analysis and policy advice with. First, big data has been increasingly being used for GDP nowcasting in fund work, particularly for those countries where official data are released with substantial delay. Job postings data have been used to analyze the labor market. Data on flights, hotel reservations, and internet search have been used to monitor tourism activities for tourism-oriented countries. And geospatial data is increasingly being used to assess physical risk hazards for the financial sector. And clearly this shows a growing demand for big data in the fund. Our department will continue to support this work with the team of data scientists to accelerate project ideation and delivery. But we will also assist other departments in developing data science skills, discovering new data sources and leverage analytical tools. And we also continue to work together with member countries and other international organizations in leveraging big data to address priority needs from member countries. And as Jaila said, cooperation is key. Big data is an area that you cannot do on your own, and we're not planning to do it alone. We need to cooperate with departments within the IMF, with the private sector, with international organizations, with academia, and that's why the present project is so great. You'll hear from a team comprising of all these different institutions, and this cooperative effort made the project successful. So I'm very happy to see the success of PortWatch. I congratulate the team. There's a lot of enthusiasm in the team, and that's rightly so. You can be proud of what has been achieved. And I look forward to seeing other projects like PortWatch coming forward, bringing real added value to the IMF and its member countries. And now pass the floor to Serkan to tell us more about PortWatch. Is first a video, okay?
When disaster strikes, the impact is felt around the world, affecting how we live, work, and trade. Climate change means we're facing more severe disasters more often. For economies to adapt and thrive, policymakers need better analytics. Introducing PortWatch from the IMF and the University of Oxford. Monitor maritime trade in real time. map and simulate port disruptions, analyze climate risks to global supply chains. Because in a connected world, disruptions spread more quickly than ever. Knowing how to deal with them is everything. Navigate the unexpected at imf.org/PortWatch.
Turn this on. Very good. Can we have the, yeah, okay. Good morning. Many thanks to Jayla and Bert for the kind words. And many thanks to everyone for joining us today, either in person or virtually. As mentioned, PortWatch is an online platform designed to monitor and simulate trade disruptions due to climate extremes and other shocks. It's being made available as a beta version for public use and comments today. We look forward to receiving broad feedback from all interested users. The platform has three purposes. First, PortWatch aims to help policymakers, analysts, and the public assess the impact of actual and potential trade disruptions, including spillover effects on trading partners. Second, it seeks to provide actionable and data-driven insights about climate risks to trade and global supply chains. Third, it strives to foster international dialogue among policymakers around vulnerabilities of the maritime trade network from climate risks. We all know that shocks to trade and supply chains can propagate rapidly around the world, leading to economic disruptions and real impacts for people. Using PortWatch, we plan to track shipping disruptions at major ports and critical shipping lanes around the world in real time. Over time, we also plan to study things like fragmentation, geopolitical risks, and ongoing changes in global trade patterns. We have a fantastic team. I don't know if you can see it. Can I? Oh, there you go. Wonderful. We have a fantastic team that has developed this platform over the last year and a half. I'm grateful to them for all their incredible dedication, innovation, and collaborative spirit. The project has had a long journey. The starting point for me was my mission to Micronesia, a small Pacific island state that is highly vulnerable to climate change. Micronesia is also a country that is highly reliant on maritime trade, importing 80% of its consumption basket from overseas. In fact, watching the activity at its ports is akin to taking the pulse of its economy. That insight from my mission in 2016 got me interested in the potential of this idea. Meanwhile, Jasper was doing very innovative work at Oxford University on related topics. Together with Robin, we decided to join forces and write a paper that applied our ideas to all Pacific islands, which were experiencing trade disruptions due to COVID at the time. The paper showed that our ideas could be implemented with some care and effort. Shortly after, Parisa and Alessandra joined our team, bringing their expertise and knowledge, and we pitched our project at the Climate Innovation Challenge last year. We were fortunate to be selected, and the team has been working tirelessly ever since. To get to this point, they went through a boot camp on design thinking, rounds of user testing, multiple feedback sessions with economists, policymakers, and trade experts, and several stages of product development. They also established strong partnerships with our many collaborators who are featured on our platform page. It's a long list, and many of them are here today. And that brings me to our partners. We already mentioned Oxford University, but there are others we would like to recognize. First, the platform would not have been made possible without the generous financial support of the Swiss State Secretariat for Economic Affairs, SECO. Second, we benefited from a very, very close collaboration with our technology partner, Esri, our data provider, the United Nations Global Platform, as well as the World Bank and the World Trade Organization. And finally, we would like to recognize the tremendous support that we received from our IMF colleagues in the Creative Lab, in the Communications Department, in our Corporate Services and Facilities Department, IT Department, and our Office of Innovation and Change, as well as the excellent guidance we received from our advisory board. It has been a true partnership and exemplary teamwork. On behalf of our team, I would like to express our deep appreciation to all of them. We are committed to continue working with our partners and explore ways we can bring further value added to the platform and our member countries. Thank you for joining our launch. And now, turn to Jasper, who will tell us a little bit about academic research behind the platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Serkan. In the next 5 minutes or so, I'm excited to share some of the cutting-edge climate risk research that underpins the PortWatch platform, which is based on the research that my colleagues and I at the University of Oxford and partner universities have done over the last 5 years. As we all know, ports are important for the economy, but their strategic location along coastline and rivers makes them prone to climate hazards. The video on the screen illustrates the occurrence of cyclone events over the last 30 years, with the dots being the location of ports. As you can see, many ports are hit by one or more cyclones every year. These cyclones and other climate extremes can have a variety of impacts to ports and trade. They can damage infrastructure and shut down ports, which in itself can delay trade or can cause entire disruptions of trade. To illustrate this, the graphs show the impact of two major hurricanes on port activity, Hurricane Sandy in 2012 and Hurricane Harvey in 2017, using high-frequency shipping data. My co-authors and I quantified, using an analysis of 27 disaster events, analyzing over 75 ports, that the median port disruption is around 6 days, and the 95th percentile, 22 days. The challenge with quantifying climate risk of disruptions to port and trade is that we have a wide distribution of plausible events that can cause disruptions. As shown in the figure, on the one hand, we have the likely range of events that can happen for which we have a historical record, and policymakers are to some extent prepared. On the other hand, we have the very unlikely range of events for which there is no historical records. It's exactly these so-called tail risk events that can cause system-wide or macro-critical impacts to the economy. Policymakers are often not aware of these tail risks, and hence they are not managed well. In PortWatch, we've included information from a range of climate hazard models that cover the entire distribution of extremes, including events that happen every year and cause minor disruptions, and those tail risk events that I just mentioned. For instance, the figure on the slide shows the climate risk to port infrastructure and revenue losses at every port globally, which is estimated to be around $8 billion per year. On top of that, a research has shown that around $100 billion of trade is affected by climate extremes at ports every year. Climate change will only make this worse. We've estimated the risk will increase by 60 to 100% by 2050. In other words, irrespective of the decarbonization scenario that we take, risk will increase and policymakers need to prepare for a higher risk future. In order to understand how these risks can spill over to the economy, in another piece of research, we mapped the dependencies between port-level trade and economic activity domestically and across borders. Based on this, we could classify ports belonging to one or multiple of the following categories. Domestically systemic ports are those that are essential to facilitate imports and exports of trade-dependent economies, such as small island developing states, as Serkan just said. Disruptions to these ports will cut off these states or islands from essential supplies. Globally, systemic ports are essential to connect global supply chains across borders and handle the vast majority of trade. These are ports we all know, such as Singapore, Shanghai, or Rotterdam. And disruptions to these ports can cause global ripple effects. Third, we have the regionally systemic ports, and they function as transshipment hubs for regional economies, which others have called regional public goods. Disruptions to these ports can cause regional spillovers to the economies that depend upon them. And to sum this all up, the research that's embedded within the platform takes an integrated approach, linking local risk information to macro-relevant indicators. As we will soon showcase, PortWatch will bring this research into the hands of policymakers to do three things: monitor the pulse of the economy during and after climate extremes at ports, perform a stress test exercise of tail risk events that affect ports and cause spillovers domestically or internationally, and third, quantify the present and future climate risks to ports and identify vulnerabilities within trade networks. In other words, PortWatch allows users to quantify the unquantified and bringing policymakers together to manage these system-wide climate risks. And with that, I would like to hand over to my colleagues Robin, Parisa, and Alessandra, who will start the demo of the PortWatch platform.
Thank you, Jasper. So, fasten your seatbelts, everyone. We're getting ready for takeoff. Can we mirror the laptop? All right. We're very excited to present to you for the very first time live the PortWatch platform. The globe illustrates the guiding principle for this project, to have a strong visual, to have an interactive tool, and one that is based on the perspective of tracking trade from space. So overall, what guided us in building this platform is we wanted to have a simple portal, a user-friendly portal, and a clean one. And with the globe, we can access directly 1,400 ports worldwide. We can access 13 choke points. And the theme of tracking trade from space is represented by not only the satellite-based data that's in the platform, but also by the perspective of looking at planet Earth from the distance and using these cutting-edge tools that we have with geospatial mapping technology from our partner Esri. Alessandra, what other elements do we want to highlight on this landing page?
Thank you, Romy. In our landing page, here at the top, you will be able to find the menus that will allow you to do the different actions that you might want to do on the portal. We have the port monitor, the recent disruptions, the spillover simulator, and the climate scenarios too. And we will go into them in a minute. We also, in the home page, highlight one of the recent disruptions that we will talk about it soon. The current disruption at the Panama Canal. And we also have a few numbers that summarize what is PortWatch in a nutshell. We track about 1,400 ports and choke points and 120,000 ships around the globe. This allows us to produce daily trade data since 2019. And why this matters? This matters because combined, they allows us to track 99% of the maritime trade. And this has been estimated to be worth $14 trillion in 2019.
Very good. So we would like to show you a few real-world applications of the PortWatch platform. And we would like to start with a very topical example, which is the Panama Canal. So in Panama, there has been a sustained drought this year that has affected vessel flow across the canal. There have been restrictions imposed, and so far this year, there has been a reduction in shipments by about 15 million tons. This is equivalent to about 5% of the usual traffic that crosses the canal. And so we have observed that there has been not only a reduction in traffic, but also delays. And those delays can be quite costly because in interconnected supply chains, producers depend on getting the goods in time. So here we have the Panama Canal page. And Alessandro, what are some of the highlights here on this page?
Yes, we are in the Port Monitor page. We can see a map that shows the Panama Canal pin and some key numbers, some key facts that allows us to understand the role of the canal in facilitating trade. So the top 3 traded industries are petroleum and chemicals, mining and agriculture. The annual vessel composition is mainly composed by tankers, 37%, and containers, 29%. Overall, it's about 12,000 ships that pass through the canal each year. Below, we have an interactive chart that shows the daily number of ships that goes through the canal. We produce this data from satellite technology, and we update them frequently. In the recent weeks, the authorities have announced that restrictions are going to intensify. And we can see that already in the data, with a downward trend showed by the current estimates, as opposed to what was recorded the year before.
Very good. So with that, let's move to our second case study. Here, we would like to look at a country that has been on all our minds recently, which is Ukraine. So this will be an application that is unrelated to climate. As we all know, the war in Ukraine has severely disrupted economic activity, including trade flows. So we would like to see what PortWatch can tell us about trade disruptions in Ukraine. So we start off by going to the Port Monitor page here, where we can search for a country, Ukraine, and then you can see which are the largest ports. And we're going to go with the largest one and see what we can learn from the port page.
Again, we have a map showing the position of the port and some key facts. In this case, we can see the role of the ports in the Ukraine economy in terms of percentage of import and export share. We have the interactive charts. We will go in more detail in a minute. And then we have the top 5 port connections that are immediate to the ports, the annual vessel compositions, and the links to the spillover simulator and the climate scenario tool. Now on the chart, let's zoom out a little bit and see in more detail what happened over the past months and year.
Right. So here you have a perspective of maritime trade flows at the port for the last 2 years. And you can see very clearly the collapse at the onset of the war. But then you see a sustained period of recovery, which occurred against the backdrop of the Black Sea Grain Initiative, which was an agreement to basically allow the safe passage of ships for the exportation of grains. And that was against the background of global increases in food prices and even famines in low-income countries. So in our data, you see the initiative reflected in a pickup in vessel flow at this major port. So with that, let's go to our third case study. So in this next application, we're going to take a real-time perspective. We're going to travel back in time to July 21st of this year, where we learned that a major cyclone was forming over the Pacific Ocean, just a few hundred miles east of the Philippines. This cyclone is called Doksuri, and it is projected to move northwest towards China, to an area where there are several major ports. So at this point, the PortWatch disaster algorithm detects that major ports may be affected by this disaster. And our alert system gets activated. All this may happen while you may be peacefully asleep in a country far away, not realizing that trade disruptions may be coming your way. Now, Parisa, how would we learn about these potential trade disruptions?
Yeah, so the easiest and the fastest way you can learn would be to subscribe to our platform. So if you haven't subscribed, please do so. It's very easy. You just click on sign up on the top right of the page, and you can easily sign up. But if you were a subscriber in July 21st, you would have received an email from our platform about the disruption that just happened. And how it works is that as time passes, we collect and compile more data, and we send our subscribers updated charts and information. So this is the last email we sent after Cyclone Doksuri. What you can see here is a lot of information about trade characteristics of the ports that were affected. You can see port activity and trade activity, maritime trade, and also you can see the spillover effects of the disruption on other ports and other countries.
Very nice. So this is an important point about the other countries because the email alert is sent not just to the directly affected country, so subscribers for that country, but also to those who may be at the receiving end of spillovers. So from that perspective, the alert serves as a way to draw the attention of people to the fact that the countries that they focus on may be affected. And so then from the alert, people can navigate to the website. And what else can we learn from then going to our portal?
Sure. So let's say you want to learn about this specific cyclone. So all you need to do is to go to the recent disruption page, which we have opened up here. So on the right-hand side, you see the list of recent disruptions that have happened globally. And if you click on these yellow disruption icons, you can see exactly the area that was disrupted by, let's say here, by Cyclone Doksuri. So, and then if you click on the disruption page, it will take you to the disruption page where you can learn more about the disruption. So this is the page for Cyclone Doksuri. On the top left, you see the map where it highlights the area that was affected and the ports in that area that we track and were affected by cyclone. On the right-hand side, you get a lot of information about the time that the cyclone happened, its severity, the country and ports that were affected, and the population that was exposed. And then as you scroll down, you see our famous chart. So here you see the effect of cyclone, which is marked in red, on port activity. And here, actually, we have aggregated up the effect of cyclone from all the ports that were affected by the cyclone. So this is the aggregated effect. And then you can also download the data easily here, both for port activities and imports and exports. After that, we provide a table. This is mostly on the first column. You see the list of ports that were affected. And then you can see a lot of trade-related characteristics of these ports. For example, on the second column, you see that the first port that we have here is the largest import and export port serving Taiwanese economy. You can also see the goods that are traded through the ports and what share of trade, actually maritime trade and total trade, goes through each of these ports.
Very nice. So you've shown us some of the direct effects. What about the indirect effects?
Of course. So also we are interested in the spillover effects of each disaster. And we provide a spillover analysis in two levels. The first one is the port level spillovers. And how we provide this information is in form of a Sankey chart. So how you can interpret the Sankey chart is in the middle. You see the list of all the affected ports. On the left-hand side, you see the top 10 ports that are upstream to the affected ports. So goods come from these ports to the affected ports. And on the right-hand side, you see the ports that are downstream to the affected ports. So ships that go through the disrupted ports visit these ports eventually. So any disruption to the ports in the middle could have upstream or downstream spillovers to these ports. We also provide some analysis at the country level, so country level spillovers. And how this works is the aggregate value of trade that goes through the disrupted ports is broken down by the partner economies and is shown as the percent of these partner economies' GDP and maritime trade.
Very nice. So here we have focused on the impact at the disaster level for all the ports that are affected. What else could we learn by focusing in on individual ports in the affected area?
Exactly. So all these effects that we show are aggregated up at the affected ports, like all the ports that were affected are aggregated up together. But imagine you want to see the impact of the disaster on an individual port. So all you need to do is to scroll back up, and you can choose any of these ports here. So for the ports that we've picked, I'm not going to go through the details because you've already seen the port level information, but you can see that these ports not only was affected by Hurricane Doksuri that we just studied, but also by 2 subsequent hurricanes in the past few months. So you can also download the port-specific data here, the same as the disaster level data.
Great. So with that, let's move to our next case study, which is on the spillover simulator. So the spillover simulator allows you to simulate the impact of an assumed port closure for a certain period of time. And we're going to focus on the port of Houston. Houston is a major hub for the US oil and gas industry. And so what we're going to assume here is, Houston, we have a problem. We're going to assume a cyclone is shutting down this port for a period of 30 days. And look at the international spillovers. And it's worth noting that the Port of Houston did actually shut down as a result of Hurricane Harvey in 2017 for about 10 days or so. So, Alessandra, what can we learn from the spillover output?
Yes, this view shows the selected port, the Port of Houston, here highlighted, and also shows the impact, the country-level spillover for a 30-day disruption assumed at the selected port. The impact is shown as the potential loss of imports, in this case, as a percent of GDP for the countries that import from the selected port. We can zoom in some of the Caribbean countries here, which were, looks like they will be the most affected, and click on one of them. When you open the pop-up, we can see more details, and we can see that in this case, for the country of Bahamas, the impact will be about 0.7% of Bahamas GDP. As Robin mentioned, Port of Houston being one of the major hubs for the oil and gas industry, we can see that in the breakdown by industry for the country of Bahamas, the most impacted industry will be petroleum, chemical, and non-metallic mineral product, with about 65% of impact.
Great. So with that, let's move to our last case study, which focuses on the climate scenarios tool. So this tool allows users to explore climate risks, both at the individual port level and at the trade network level. And for our case study, we're going to take the perspective of France. We're going to be interested in understanding what are the climate risks to France, not just domestically, but in terms of climate hazards that could affect the global trade network that France depends on. So think of our prior example with Houston. Let's say if France were dependent on the Port of Houston for imports and the Port of Houston shuts down, that poses a risk to France. So essentially, we're going to look at which are the ports that matter for France in terms of climate risks.
We have here open the climate scenario tool, and we are looking at the country trade risk at present. The map shows the country of France highlighted here, and the top 100 most climate vulnerable ports for the selected countries' imports, reflecting the annual expected days of downtime due to climate risk or climate-related hazards at these ports, and also the amount of import that flow through them. We can see a number of clusters. For example, here in the north of France, we can see a cluster for transports. These are ports that are responsible for handling the domestic trade, and hence why they are highlighted. Then we have a cluster on the Mediterranean. We have a cluster on the US, which exports a lot to France, and also a cluster here on East Asia, which export to France, but these ports are also highly at risk of climate hazards. Through the climate scenario tool, you could also assess the impact for different RCP scenarios based on the different climate projection and the increase of these climate extremes for the future by 2050.
Thank you. So that concludes our case studies. Before we go to the Q&A session, we would like to show you a few additional resources on the platform that we believe can be quite valuable. The first one is in the top left corner. You see the Access Data link. That takes you to our data page where you can download all the data that power the PortWatch platform, and including the methodology underlying all these different data sets. Then a second resource is under the About Us link, where we have a drop-down menu. You see there are several good resources here. One is the frequently asked questions section. Another is the project description at the top, and testimonials show some of the use cases so far, how PortWatch has been used in practice. And finally, we have a team page where we are recognizing the many people who have contributed to this project, and we are, very proud of our collaborators, of the organizations that have supported us, the contributors, and all the many people who have given us guidance and support and suggestions for this project. So with that, we're concluding our demo, and we'll hand over to Farah for the Q&A session.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Serkan. Thanks, Jasper, Carissa, Alessandra, Robin. This was very, very informative. I would like to encourage you all to ask questions. So please, if you have any question, we have mics. And if you don't mind, state your name and your department. We will be alternating between the questions that we've received externally, the questions that from the room, and the questions from also the live stream chat. So with that, we'll start with some of the questions that we received externally. So how does this platform help small and low-income countries?
I can start with that one. So small island countries are among the key user audiences here for this project because they combine three characteristics. One is they are vulnerable to disasters themselves, so that's a direct relevance of the platform. But they're also highly dependent on maritime trade, which means that these disruptions can really severely impact their economies. And the third characteristic they have is that they often have low statistical capacity, meaning there is only limited official data across the macroeconomy, and for the data that is available, often has a long release lag. So for these countries, we make available data for maritime trade for all the ports. Oftentimes, these small countries have only a single major port, and the data is updated very frequently. And we hope that this is a valuable resource, in particular for small island countries, also low-income countries, and other small states.
Thank you. So we'll take some questions from the virtual attendees, and please, if you have any questions from the room, please feel free to ask. So, yeah, please, go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everyone. First of all, congratulations for the tool. I think it's a very interesting one. I'm Felix Mione from the African Department. I work on Mauritius, a small island, very vulnerable to climate shocks. So I find this very useful. So 2 questions. I came in a bit late, actually. I hope I'm not asking something you talked about already. But the first question is about timeliness, right? So let's say a cyclone is expected to hit Mauritius next week, right? Is the tool able to already at that stage, give me information about expected impact and so on, or this would be something the tool will do ex post after the shock is hit? The second question is more generally, are you planning to make this tool available to outside the fund, or this is something that's going to remain only internal? Because I think it's very, very useful tool, not only for the fund, but even for the authorities themselves. Thank you.
I can get the first question. So yeah, normally when a cyclone starts forming, within a few days, we normally receive some alerts from Global Disaster Alert and Coordination Systems webpage. Is a joint effort between United Nations and European Commission. And then when the severity level is high, we basically generate these automatic email alerts. So you will receive the first alert within a day or so after the start of the disruption. But as we receive more data, because we provide like satellite data, which basically after a few days, you want to see what's the effect of the disaster on the country or on a port. So within a week after the disruption, we'll send an updated email, which will have basically updated data on the port activity and maritime trade. And then we continue sending weekly emails until the economic activity goes back to its normal level. And then the second question.
The second question on the data? Okay, sounds good. Okay, on the second question, the website is available both internally and externally as of this morning, 10 a.m. And it's available at www.imf.org/PortWatch.
You can also simulate that. If you knew it's coming in 2 weeks, you can also simulate.
Yeah, I mean, you can also simulate different scenarios at specific, if you know which ports might be affected, you can simulate, and then you can do scenarios like you might do scenarios that's 7 days of disruption, 10 days of disruption. And then you can also, you can do that definitely. Thank you.
We have sent pilot alerts so far over the past 12 to 15 months. In fact, one of the pilot alerts was for Cyclone Freddy near Mozambique, Mauritius, and Madagascar. And in terms of the optimal point for when to pull the trigger and send the initial alert, we're still sort of experimenting what is the optimal time. For now, we're going with when the impact is felt at the beginning.
Presentation. I really enjoyed it this morning, and I enjoyed working with you guys in the last year and 3 months that I've been at the fund. I inherited the PortWatch from my predecessor. My name is Michele Ruta. I work in the trade team in SPR, and it's been a fantastic inheritance. I've been very happy. So my question for you, and Sir can say something in his introductory remarks. What are the next steps for PortWatch? What are you going to do next? Thanks.
Okay, I can maybe take that, and please jump in. So our next step is to collect feedback from users, both internally and externally. And we see this as a beta version that's now open to public use and comments. And we will be working very closely with our partners to incorporate the feedback in the coming weeks and months. And we also plan to do some in-reach both inside the fund, so we can help our colleagues to utilize this platform in their daily work, for their country work, for their surveillance work, but also with our partners, the World Bank, the WTO, World Trade Organization, and others. So we have a bit of a post-launch communication plan along those lines.
And in addition to in-reach, also outreach to the rest of the world, we will have several external engagements coming up, including an event in London in March that will be led by Oxford University. So all these engagements will allow us to collect feedback and improve the platform and make it more and more valuable as a tool.
Yes, and from the Oxford point of view, this was also a great illustration that our research could be useful, make policy impact, and now over the next months or years, we hope to continue this collaboration and foster it, and also improve some of the new research that we're doing into the platform.
Thank you. If we may entertain one of the questions from some of the remote people joining, and then we'll get back to you shortly. So speaking of Jasper, policy makers, one of the questions from the chat, how should policymakers use this data to prioritize ports for climate adaptation?
Yes, thank you. The platform has many uses. Our main use is for policymakers to get informed about some of these risks they're potentially unaware of. The platform has multiple purposes, including quantification of risk at present and in the future. And this information is available everywhere. And the good thing about this is that this could be used for multiple follow-up strategies, including to build resilience within the maritime trade network or at specific ports of interest.
Thank you. Please, go ahead.
Thank you so much. This is very interesting. I also opened up the website to take a look at it, and it looks pretty fascinating. Thank you. It's great work. So I have 3 questions for you. So the first one is about the data reconciliation. Obviously, the data that you're getting is real time or close to real time. But then could this data be reconciled with what we receive from authorities on, that's, if you like, more accurate data, or I don't know, like it accounts for all the factors that you probably can't capture by satellite? It's just a question. So that's one. So ensuring consistency and compatibility, especially with what our desks are getting. So we want to see that if we look at this as an indicator, then is that also be consistent with what desks will put in their reports? So that's number one. The second one is, sorry, I just remembered that I didn't introduce myself, so apologies for that. So Majid Bazarbash from Office of Risk Management. So the second one is, now that's helpful for my second question. So we want to see if there's some summary statistics that you either generate or it could be generated. So we could have it as an indicator in an aggregated level. So let's say someone is not just interested in Panama. We want to see, like, if in the region there is some big risk that's emerging, that, it's a very good monitoring device, right? Real time. You can even look at, like, early warning signs. So that would be really interesting. I'm interested in knowing that. And the third one that's related, it's can we come up with some key risk indicator by looking at, because you're looking at trade disruptions, and trying to connect the disruptions to the extent that they could have an impact on global economic activity or global trade, if you like, any way that we could have it as a risk indicator. Okay, thank you so much.
We'll start with the first one, we can take the second one.
Yep. Okay. So you wanted me to start?
Up to you.
I was going to address the one on the regional dimension. There, I think you can work with the bulk download file, which is on the Access data page, and you can construct any kind of regional aggregates per your preferences, depending on the countries that you're interested in. On the first question, Serkan may have more thoughts, but what I was going to say is the daily activity indicator of maritime trade is not so much a, let's say, a forecasting tool that would, let's say, serve as a nowcast for the monthly official trade flows that you get. because it's relatively noisy. So you could try it out for certain countries, but the main application is to see big swings and big shifts, for example, in the context of disruptions, or in the context of a turning point in the economy, or let's say even at a global level, right? There is a major shock. So to look at big shifts as opposed to month-to-month nowcast of official trade flows. Serkan, did you want to add?
Yes, absolutely. And we see this data as a complement, not a substitute for official data. And in some ways, you could actually get a little bit more granularity because it's, port by port rather than sometimes, aggregate for the whole country when you get trade statistics. But we see this as a complement, not a substitute for official data. There are several reasons why we are a bit cautious on that, and you can look at our frequently asked questions where the two may not match one-to-one because customs data gets recorded with certain, like when when the goods clear the customs, whereas this is when the goods are loaded or unloaded to the port. So there could be small differences like that, and we try to highlight them in our frequently asked questions. And also I would say that our focus is on port disruptions, and not so much on port calls, because there is quite a lot of data on that from some of the countries. Although what this product brings is to homogenize that and provide a kind of a uniform data set for all countries around the world. And that could be quite useful for cross comparability of studies.
I think the last part was on the global risk indicator. I think that's something we may look at for the future. So far, we have focused more at the country level or at the port level, not so much at the global level. But it's a nice idea.
So we'll take one more question from one of the remote participants, and we'll take other questions from the room, if you don't mind. So, in what ways does PortWatch include climate information? And a follow-up to that, is it possible to download raw data for analysis and research purposes? And are there any restrictions?
Yeah, if I can start with the climate information question, I think climate is embedded in different ways. The first, as Parisa already mentioned, the coupling with the climate early alert system. So if a climate-related event happens somewhere in the world, and we expect that it may affect some of the ports, you can get a notification and say, okay, there may be potentially an impact to trade in your country and potentially spillover effects to other countries. So that's the here and now. On top of that, as we showed in the demo, there's a future climate scenario platform where you can look at present climate risk in terms of infrastructure damages, downtime of ports, but also looking at the future in how that risk may change and where the real vulnerabilities are or bottlenecks are within your country's trade network.
Yeah, no, the data are available for download. There is also an API that allows programmatic access to the data. And general IMF terms and conditional applies. So mostly the restrictions are more on the commercial use of the data.
All right, please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Jehan Jack, and I'm in SPR at the IMF. Congratulations on the launch. My question is, when reporting on non-climate related disruptions, does the platform distinguish between different events? For instance, you mentioned at the beginning geopolitical, geoeconomic fragmentation. Another type of event could be like terrorism, terrorist activity. So does it make this distinction? And if so, how does it do so? Thanks.
So we have a disruption page on the platform that we briefly showed earlier. On that disruption page, the events that we include are, you could call it natural disasters, so climate-related disasters, or earthquakes, for example, are included, but we don't have separate events for other, or entries for other types of events, such as geopolitical or terrorism. At least so far.
Thank you. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Dominik Englert. I work as a senior economist in the Transport Global Practice at the World Bank. Also, many congratulations from our team. This is amazing work that you've put together here. I'm already thinking a couple of steps further, and I'm wondering at the moment, so we've got one port that is being taken out of the global network, and then the direct ports that will be affected. When do you think we will not only have the first level, but maybe the second and the third level of ports that can also be affected through ripple effects? And the second question is, have you been thinking also already about the idea of, okay, we take the port of Houston out now because it's going to be affected by a climate disaster and so on. What theoretically or practically could be the backup ports in the same area, in the region and so on, that would be available to accommodate the imports or take care of the exports? Obviously, this would involve a lot of questions about capacity and road transport that would need to be rearranged. But for me, it would already be very interesting to see, for example, in the Caribbean or in the Pacific, okay, if these three ports are out there, kind of which are the ports that are most likely kind of to jump in now and help as kind of, yeah, backup options to still supply the islands in the aftermath. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dominic, for that question. I think, as you said, you're already a few steps ahead, as always. I think this platform and the user cases that we've included in the tool are sort of a first step based on our user interactions and priorities that we set, and also to deliver actually a platform at the end of the road. And as you said, there are many further applications, and some of the things you touched upon, things around ripple effects, multiple ports that could be affected, the choke points, and these questions about, well, what is the resilience in the actual trade network? These are also topics that are very much on the research agenda still and unanswered. So I think this is, if there is enough policy demand for these things, I think research will follow, and hopefully over the next few years we can include some of this in the platform as well.
Just to add one more thing to it, we really appreciate the feedback from the World Bank. It's already been extremely helpful for us. And I would say that in the disruption monitor that you saw earlier, we can accommodate multiple port disruptions. Actually, Parisa showed that earlier. And we hope to do the same thing with the simulator, the second piece that we showed you. And that's a little bit more complicated, but it's something on our mind as a next step. Thank you.
So we will take one last question. Would you like to ask a question? Yeah, please. Yeah, please, if you don't mind.
Hello. Is this okay? My name is Linda Lilienfeld, and I'm a director of a project called Let's Talk About Water. And I've known about ESRI for many, many years because of hydrology. And I wondered who your partner is for your weather information, your climate and weather information, because all your other partners are trade and policy. So I was curious how you acquire it and use it and et cetera.
So our partner is a Global Disaster Alerts and Coordination Systems, GDAX. It's an initiative between United Nations and European Commission. And also they receive information from disaster managers that are local on the ground. So we receive the information for any disaster from them. And basically we filter them and send notifications for disasters that are a high severity level or red level. But the information is published on gdax.org. You can also monitor all the disasters happen globally, natural disasters.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, Serkan. Thanks, Jasper, Carissa, Alessandra, Robin. So we have a lot more, many more questions. The team will get back and will answer the questions from online users. But we're running out of time. So with this concludes the live stream portion of the event. We would like to thank all of the online participants, and we wish you all a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you. And those four. Okay. For those who are in the room, please join us for the reception. And the team is here. Should you have any additional questions, they will be happy to answer.